Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking two of the biggest, most loaded words in human history, sin and faith, and we are going to completely dismantle and rebuild them. If you think you already have these locked down, well, get ready. We're going to experience a massive paradigm shift by stripping away centuries of cultural baggage and looking at what the original biblical texts actually say.
So let me just ask you this right off the bat. Where did your faith actually come from? Think about it for a second. It's incredibly common for us to just assume faith is something we generate all on our own, right? We treat it like it's the result of sheer willpower or some sudden burst of human resolve. Like if we just try really, really hard, we can force ourselves to believe. But as we're going to see today, that's a huge misconception, and honestly, it's one that is holding us back.
Okay, let's dive into this with part 1, redefining sin. To genuinely understand what faith is, we first have to redefine its exact opposite. Romans 14 tells us that whatever does not proceed from faith is sin. And if we look at the original languages, this gets crystal clear. The Hebrew word hatah and the Greek word hamartia both share a very specific, literal definition. They literally mean to miss the mark or to lose the target. Picture an archer firing an arrow and just completely missing the bullseye. So sin isn't just about breaking some arbitrary list of moral rules. Fundamentally, it's about missing the ultimate target God set for us. And that ultimate target? It's Jesus Christ himself.
Now let's apply this to the very beginning. In Genesis chapter 2, Adam's sin wasn't just the physical act of eating a piece of fruit. The text tells us the tree of life was right there in the center of the garden, and that represents Jesus, the source of life. Adam's true sin was that he shifted his gaze. He took his eyes off that ultimate target. He deliberately turned away from the tree of life so he could be his own independent judge of good and evil. He essentially looked inward at himself, and by doing that, he completely missed the mark.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happened next with Adam's son Cain. Hebrews 11 deliberately contrasts Cain and Abel. Cain brought the fruits of the ground, literally the dirt and sweat of his own human effort and hard work. Abel, on the other hand, brought a sacrifice by faith. Cain's fatal sin was self-righteousness. He was trying to reach God through his own earthly achievements rather than hitting the true mark of faith. His eyes were glued to his own hands, not the target.
Which brings us to part 2, the true author of faith.
So, if human effort always misses the target, how do we actually get faith? Well, Hebrews 12 gives us the precise answer. It commands us to look to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. The original Greek here is absolutely profound. The word archegos translates to the pioneer, the founder, or the first cause, and teleotes translates to the perfecter or the finisher. This emphatically proves that Jesus is the sole initiator of our faith and the one who finishes it. He's the starting line and the finish line. We literally do not spark it, and we do not finalize it.
The Apostle Paul drives this home perfectly in Ephesians 2. He writes, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God." When you pair this with 1 Corinthians 3, where Paul talks about how one person plants a seed, another waters it, but only God actually gives the growth, it cements a truly liberating fact. Your faith is 100% a gift, planted, nurtured, and grown entirely by God. So if you're exhausted trying to drum up your own faith right now, just take a breath. It's a gift. It is never a human achievement.
All right, part 3, faith walking on water. Let's look at this incredibly visceral story of the Apostle Peter in Matthew 14. Right in the middle of a raging storm, Peter yells out from the boat, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Now keep in mind, Peter was a professional fisherman. He knew exactly how the ocean worked. He knew humans do not walk on water. The crucial point is that he didn't rely on his own earthly logic, and he definitely didn't hype himself up with some internal motivational speech. His faith to step out came directly from hearing Jesus' command. His faith was initiated by the word of the true author.
Let's trace the rising tension here. Step 1. Peter actually steps out of the boat, and his eyes are completely locked on Jesus. The impossible is happening. He's walking on water. But then step 2. He looks away. He shifts his eyes off the ultimate target and starts focusing on his own fleshly fears and the violent, chaotic waves around him. And at that exact moment, step 3 happens. He immediately begins to sink. The very second he took his eyes off the perfecter of his faith, that faith faltered.
But watch how this plays out, because this should be incredibly reassuring to all of us. Even when our flesh is weak, like Jesus talks about in Matthew 26, and we inevitably miss the mark and start to sink, we aren't just left to drown. Jesus doesn't stand there on the water shaking his head at Peter. He actively reaches out his hand to catch him, pulls him up, and asks, "Oh, you have little faith, why did you doubt?" Jesus is the active Savior and perfecter of our faith, stepping in the exact moment we fail.
Now, what's really fascinating is the direct internal transformation that happens the moment we fix our eyes squarely back on Jesus. Think about these contrasts. When our internal state is totally paralyzed by doubt, looking at Jesus immediately changes that into faith. When we are consumed by fear, locking eyes on the true target flips that fear into boldness. And when we feel like we only have this tiny, fragile, small faith, focusing on the author results in a growing faith. This transformation isn't us trying harder, it's a direct result of where we are placing our focus.
And finally, part 4, the trap of my own resolve.
We really need to warn against a super common yet highly destructive misconception. You've probably heard someone boldly declare, or maybe you've even promised yourself, "I will win by my own faith. I'm going to resolve to do better and just believe harder." But beware of the immense pride hidden in that statement. Relying on our own internal strength to generate faith is actually a subtle deception. It echoes all the way back to the serpent in Genesis 3. It's that prideful trap of trying to be like God, attempting to be the author of our own spiritual victory instead of just humbly relying on the one who already won it.
2 Corinthians 4 paints the absolute most accurate picture of who we really are. It says, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us." Let that sink in for a second. We are just fragile earthly jars of clay. We can't sustain ourselves, and we absolutely cannot generate supernatural faith on our own. The surpassing power, the true, unshakable faith, it all resides entirely in the treasure planted inside us. And that treasure is Jesus.
The Apostle Paul perfectly summarizes the posture we need to take in Philippians 3. He urges us to completely abandon our self-reliance. He says we have to forget what lies behind. And by that, he means our past human efforts, our fleshly failures, our earthly self-righteousness. Instead, we are called to strain forward intensely to the prize. We have to press toward the ultimate target, Jesus Christ, recognizing that he is the one who has already secured us.
So I want to wrap up this explainer with a provocative question for you to really chew on. Right now, are your eyes fixed on your own efforts, your own willpower, your own fragile resolve? Or are they locked squarely on the true target? Because the incredible truth we've uncovered today is that true spiritual freedom only happens when we stop looking inward at ourselves and we start looking entirely to Jesus, the true author, the pioneer, and the ultimate perfecter of our faith. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep your eyes on the mark.